The air in the ballroom was thick with the scent of lilies and an undercurrent of polished ambition, a familiar aroma at these corporate galas Mark loved so much. I smoothed the silk of my dress, a deep sapphire that shimmered with every subtle movement, and smiled at a passing acquaintance. Mark, my husband of 3 years, was at my side, his hand a comforting weight on the small of my back. He was charming, attentive, and utterly absorbed in his professional world, a world that I, as a freelance graphic designer, orbited but rarely truly entered. Tonight, however, felt different. A subtle hum, almost imperceptible, vibrated beneath the surface of the polite chatter and clinking champagne flutes. "Diane, darling, there you are." Mark's voice, warm and smooth, pulled me from my reverie. He gestured towards a woman standing a few feet away, her back partially to us, as she engaged in conversation with a cluster of executives. "I'd like you to meet Kimberly Hayes. She's been a phenomenal addition to the team." The woman turned, and the hum intensified, morphing into a sharp, unexpected strum against my nerves. Kimberly Hayes. She was striking, an undeniable force even across the room. Her hair, a rich chestnut, fell in sleek waves around her shoulders, framing a face that was all sharp angles and intelligent grace. She wore a tailored black pantsuit, a stark contrast to the flowy dresses adorning most women present, and it somehow made her stand out even more. It wasn't just the clothes, it was the way she wore them, with an almost effortless confidence that bordered on understated power. As she met Mark's gaze, a polite smile touched her lips, but her eyes, dark and incredibly perceptive, seemed to flick past him, settling on me for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. "Kimberly, this is my wonderful wife, Diane," Mark announced, his voice beaming with pride. Kimberly's smile widened, a slow, deliberate bloom that reached her eyes. And those eyes, they weren't just dark, they were fathomless, like polished obsidian, and when they landed on me, it felt less like an introduction and more like an assessment. A prickle, light and insistent, traced its way up my arms. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Diane," she said, her voice a low, melodious alto that seemed to carry an undercurrent of something more. Her hand extended, firm and cool, and our handshake lasted a beat too long. I felt a blush creep up my neck, a foreign warmth that had nothing to do with the crowded room. My polite smile felt stiff, glued in place. "You too, Kimberly," I managed, pulling my hand back a little too quickly. I told myself it was just a professional courtesy, a habit some people had of being overly cordial. But the feeling of her touch, brief as it was, persisted, a strange echo on my skin. Kimberly's gaze, however, remained fixed on me. It wasn't overtly aggressive, but it was undeniably invasive. It felt like she was peeling back layers, seeing past the polite veneer, observing something only she was privy to. "Mark has spoken very highly of you," she said, her voice smooth as river stones. "He mentioned your work with the Children's Art Foundation. Quite commendable." I blinked, surprised she knew such a detail. Mark rarely brought up my charity work in these circles. "Oh, yes, it's a passion project," I replied, feeling a little flustered. "A passion project," Kimberly echoed, a faint, almost imperceptible quirk to one corner of her mouth. Her eyes crinkled at the corners, not quite a full smile, but something more intimate, like a shared secret. I admire that. Dedication to something beyond the everyday. It's rare. Her words, seemingly innocuous, held an unexpected weight. They felt less like a compliment and more like an insinuation, a silent question hanging in the air. Mark, oblivious, chimed in, "Diane is incredibly talented, a true artist." Kimberly's gaze never left mine. "I can see that," she murmured. And in that moment, under the glittering chandeliers and the careful smiles, I felt a distinct, unfamiliar shiver. It wasn't cold. It was something else entirely. Something unsettling, exhilarating, and utterly forbidden. The encounter with Kimberly lingered, a faint, insistent hum in the background of my thoughts. Throughout the rest of the evening, I found my eyes drifting towards her, almost involuntarily. She moved through the crowd with an effortless grace, a magnetic pull that drew others into her orbit. Each time our gazes met across the room, which happened with unnerving frequency, a jolt went through me. Her eyes held an intensity that was both captivating and disquieting, a silent conversation that bypassed words entirely. Later, as Mark was engrossed in a particularly animated discussion about market trends, Kimberly materialized beside me, a fresh glass of champagne in hand. "Enjoying the festivities, Diane?" she asked, her voice a warm tone against the din. "It's certainly lively," I managed, a little startled by her sudden proximity. The lilies suddenly smelled sweeter, almost cloying. She chuckled, a low, throaty sound that sent another shiver down my spine. "Lively indeed. Though I suspect you prefer a more understated charm, don't you?" It wasn't a question, but a knowing observation. She had barely spoken to me, yet it felt like she was dissecting my very nature. "Perhaps," I confessed, surprised by my honesty. Most people, especially in this setting, expected me to enthuse about the glamour. "I thought so," she murmured, taking a slow sip of her champagne. Her gaze swept over my face before meeting my eyes again. "There's a quiet strength about you, Diane. It's refreshing." Her words were like small, delicate brushstrokes, each one painting a picture of me that felt both true and unnervingly intimate. My cheeks warmed again. "That's a very kind thing to say." "Only honest," she countered, her smile enigmatic. She then turned her head slightly, her gaze drifting towards Mark, who was still deep in conversation. "Mark's very fortunate to have you." Her voice, though still smooth, carried a subtle shift, a different quality that made the compliment feel less about my husband and more about something else. It was an insinuation, expertly woven into a seemingly innocent remark. Before I could formulate a response, she leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial whisper that was meant only for my ears. The scent of her perfume, a sophisticated blend of something woody and subtly floral, enveloped me. I find these gatherings can be quite stifling sometimes. All the polite smiles and unspoken expectations. Her eyes, dark and knowing, met mine. "Don't you agree?" It was a question, yes, but also an invitation. An invitation to acknowledge a shared sentiment, a hidden understanding beneath the surface of the social performance. My heart gave a strange, unexpected lurch. I felt a pull, a curious desire to confide in her, to agree, to connect on this deeper, unspoken level. It was a dangerous thought, thrilling in its audacity. "Sometimes," I whispered back, my voice barely audible above the music. The word felt like a secret exchanged, a bond forged in the midst of a crowded room. A genuine smile touched Kimberly's lips then, one that reached her eyes and softened their intensity, making them sparkle with a hint of mischievous warmth. "I knew it," she said softly, her hand briefly, lightly, resting on my arm before pulling away. The contact was fleeting, barely there, yet it left a distinct trail of warmth. "Perhaps we can escape the liveliness sometime soon. Grab a coffee. Discuss the unspoken expectations of the world." The suggestion hung in the air, light and casual, yet loaded with unspoken meaning. It was an overture, a subtle invitation that felt far more personal than a mere offer of coffee between colleagues' wives. My mind raced, grappling with the implications. It was just coffee, I reasoned, harmless. Yet, the way she looked at me, the way her touch lingered in memory, told a different story. It promised something more, something unknown and undeniably alluring. I found myself nodding, a small, involuntary movement. "I'd like that," I said, the words slipping out before I could properly think. And as Kimberly's smile widened, a triumphant gleam in her dark eyes, I knew I had just stepped onto a path I hadn't intended. The coffee invitation settled into my routine like an unexpected guest, not unwelcome, but certainly unanticipated. Days blurred into a week. Mark, preoccupied with a looming project deadline, barely noticed my distraction. But Kimberly did. Her text started subtly, brief, almost professional messages forwarded from Mark about a minor detail, quickly followed by a casual, "Hope your week is going well, Diane," or "Just saw this article," made me think of our conversation. Each one a gentle tug, a reminder of her presence, of that shared glance in the ballroom. I found myself looking forward to them, a strange flutter developing in my chest whenever my phone chimed. It was foolish, I knew. I was a happily married woman. Yet, the small thrill, the recognition of being seen, felt surprisingly potent. Then came the coincidences. I was browsing in my favorite independent bookstore, lost among the spines of classic literature, when a voice, smooth and low, startled me. Lost in thought, or just lost in a good story? Kimberly stood a few feet away, a leather-bound journal in her hand. She wore a simple, elegant camel-colored sweater and dark jeans, looking effortlessly chic, yet approachable. Her dark hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, revealing the elegant line of her neck. Her eyes, however, still held that intense, searching quality. "Kimberly, what a surprise," I stammered, my heart doing an erratic little dance. The blush, now a familiar companion, crept up my neck. She smiled, a genuine, easy smile that made her look younger, less formidable. "Is it? This is my sanctuary, especially on a quiet afternoon." She gestured to the surrounding shelves. "You seem to frequent here, too." It was a statement, not a question, delivered with an air of knowing. It was unsettling, yet also strangely flattering, as if she had already learned the quiet corners of my soul. "Yes, it's a peaceful escape," I admitted. "Precisely," she agreed, stepping closer. The subtle scent of her perfume, that woody floral blend, wafted towards me, comforting and intoxicating all at once. "So, what secrets are you delving into today?" she asked, gesturing to the book in my hand. I showed her the worn copy of Wuthering Heights. "Just revisiting an old favorite. The tormented passion of the Moors," she mused, her eyes twinkling. "A classic tale of destructive love. Do you believe in such all-consuming devotion?" Her question caught me off guard. It was personal, delving far beyond the superficial conversations I usually had. I thought of Mark, of our steady, comfortable love, and then of the unsettling pull I felt towards her. I believe love can be powerful. I chose my words carefully, but perhaps not always destructive. Kimberly's gaze deepened, her dark eyes seeming to bore into mine. "And what if the most powerful love is, by its very nature, a little bit destructive to everything else?" Her voice dropped, a mere whisper. "What if it forces you to dismantle your carefully constructed world, just to make space for it?" Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. It felt like she was articulating a nascent, terrifying thought that had just begun to form in the deepest recesses of my own mind. A jolt went through me, an electric current of recognition. I felt exposed, as if she could see the burgeoning cracks in my own carefully constructed contentment. "That's a profound thought," I managed, my voice a little breathless. She held my gaze for a long moment, a silent challenge passing between us. Then, she smiled, a slow, knowing curl of her lips that held a hint of mischief. "Perhaps we should discuss the destructive nature of love over that coffee, Diane. My treat. Tomorrow afternoon." It wasn't a question that allowed for refusal. It was an expectation, a gentle command cloaked in a casual offer. And despite the rising sense of panic, the internal alarms blaring, I found myself nodding, a small, involuntary movement of my head. "Okay," I heard myself say, the word barely a whisper. The idea of dissecting destructive love with her, of delving into those dangerous thoughts, was terrifying, but also, undeniably, utterly irresistible. The coffee shop was bathed in the warm, golden light of a late autumn afternoon. I arrived a few minutes early, clutching my purse, a knot of nervous energy tightening in my stomach. The thought of this coffee with Kimberly had been a constant hum in my mind since our bookstore encounter, a compelling distraction that felt both exhilarating and deeply unsettling. Kimberly arrived precisely on time, a vision in a charcoal gray trench coat, her dark hair catching the light as she walked. She had a way of moving that was both graceful and purposeful, commanding attention without demanding it. She smiled when she saw me, a genuine, warm smile that reached her eyes, softening their usual intensity. "Diane," she said, her voice a low murmur as she slid into the seat opposite me. "Thanks for coming." "Of course," I replied, my voice feeling a little too high. A barista approached, and we ordered, my Earl Grey contrasting with her strong black coffee. As we waited, a comfortable silence settled between us, punctuated by the quiet clatter of cups and hushed conversations around us. It wasn't awkward. It was charged, filled with unspoken things. Kimberly simply watched me, her gaze unhurried, almost tender. It felt as if she was absorbing every nuance of my expression, every flicker of emotion in my eyes. "So," she began, her voice soft when our drinks arrived, "destructive love." She took a sip of her coffee, her eyes never leaving mine. "Do you think all great loves must, in some way, dismantle the old self to make way for the new?" It was a direct question cutting through the pleasantries. It felt less like a philosophical debate and more like a probe into my very soul. I found myself surprisingly willing to engage. I've always thought of love as building, as an addition," I confessed, my fingers tracing the rim of my cup. "Not as tearing down." "And what if what you've built isn't quite complete?" she countered gently, her voice still low, almost hypnotic. "What if there are rooms in your own house you haven't even discovered yet? Rooms that can only be unlocked by a different key, by a different kind of light?" Her words struck a chord, resonating with a quiet ache I hadn't realized I carried. Mark loved me, deeply and truly, but his love was a comfortable, familiar embrace. It didn't challenge me, didn't push me to explore the hidden chambers of my own being. Kimberly's words felt like a delicate, insistent pickaxe, chipping away at the foundation of my perceived contentment. "That's a rather unsettling thought," I admitted, my gaze dropping to my cup. "Is it?" she pressed, her voice softer still. "Or is it liberating? To imagine there's more to you than you ever knew. More capacity for joy, for passion, for a kind of connection that hums through your very bones." Her hand reached across the table, not quite touching mine, but resting close enough that I could feel the residual warmth radiating from her skin. "To feel truly seen, Diane. Not just observed, but recognized." "Understood." Her eyes, dark and deep, held mine captive. In their depths, I saw a reflection of myself I hadn't seen before, a woman on the precipice of something vast and unknown, with both fear and a nascent, undeniable excitement. It was as if she was offering me a glimpse of my own hidden landscape, a topography of feelings I had kept buried beneath layers of societal expectation and comfortable routine. My breath hitched. The air between us was suddenly thick, charged with an invisible current. The background noise of the coffee shop faded, leaving only her voice, her gaze, and the frantic pounding of my own heart. It was a silent invitation, a whisper that promised not just connection, but a profound, almost dangerous awakening. And in that moment, sitting across from Kimberly, I knew, with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified me, that I was irrevocably drawn to the fire she offered. The coffee meeting bled into a series of casual encounters, each one chipping away at my carefully constructed defenses. Kimberly became a constant, albeit subtle, presence in my life. She'd text me late at night, a cryptic message about a book she was reading, or a piece of art that reminded her of our conversations. Her observations about me grew sharper, more precise, touching on vulnerabilities I hadn't realized I was displaying, yet doing so with a gentle understanding that disarmed me. Then came the news of Mark's business trip, an extended stay in Europe, overseeing a major new acquisition. He was excited, bubbling with professional enthusiasm, and I feigned equal excitement, my smile feeling stiff. Alone again, the quiet of our apartment amplified the persistent hum of Kimberly in my thoughts. The evening Mark left, a polite, almost formal text arrived from Kimberly. Hope Mark's flight was smooth. If you find yourself in need of company to ward off the silence, my door is open. No pressure, of course. The no pressure was a flimsy veil. I knew, instinctively, what company she was offering. A part of me, the rational, loyal part, screamed to ignore it. But another, growing part, the one that had been stirred by her intense gaze and profound questions, felt an undeniable pull. The apartment felt vast and empty. The silence was deafening. I didn't reply immediately. I paced, wrestled with my conscience, with the image of Mark's trusting face. But the allure was too strong, the curiosity too potent. This was a chance, I told myself, to simply explore, to understand this strange connection. My fingers, almost of their own volition, typed out a reply. "Thank you, Kimberly. Perhaps a quick drink?" To stave off the silence. Her response was immediate. "My place." 10 minutes. "I have a rather good Cabernet waiting." 10 minutes. The brevity of it felt like a challenge, an acknowledgement of the precipice I was standing on. I changed quickly, pulling on a simple black dress, my hands shaking slightly. As I looked in the mirror, I saw a reflection of myself I barely recognized, a woman on the verge of something reckless, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and wild anticipation. Kimberly's apartment was sleek, minimalist, and tastefully adorned with abstract art, a direct reflection of her, I realized. She met me at the door, wearing a silk robe that tied loosely at her waist. Her dark hair was down, falling around her shoulders, and her eyes, in the dim light of her living room, seemed to glow. The scent of her perfume was stronger here, more intoxicating. "Diane," she murmured, her voice a warm embrace. She gestured me in, closing the door with a soft click that sealed us in, away from the world. She poured 2 glasses of the deep red Cabernet, handing one to me. Our fingers brushed, and this time, the contact lingered, an intentional connection. My breath hitched. "To warding off the silence," she said, raising her glass, her eyes fixed on mine. "To silence," I echoed, my voice a whisper. We sat on plush leather sofas, the low lighting creating an intimate cocoon. The conversation flowed easily at first, light and unassuming, but beneath the surface, an undeniable tension crackled. Her gaze was constant, heavy with unspoken meaning, and it ignited a responding warmth deep within me. She spoke of art, of philosophy, of the human condition, all while subtly, expertly, weaving a web of connection. She leaned forward, her elbows on her knees, her eyes never leaving mine. "You know, Diane," she began, her voice dropping to that low, hypnotic tone, "I've always found silence to be the most revealing. It's when you truly hear what your heart is trying to tell you." She paused then, "And what is your heart telling you right now?" Her directness, her unnerving ability to cut through pretense, left me breathless. My heart was pounding, a frantic drum against my ribs. I felt a magnetic pull towards her, an almost desperate need to close the small distance between us. The wine had loosened my inhibitions, but it was her presence, her undeniable allure, that truly dissolved them. Before I could answer, before I could even formulate the tangled thoughts in my mind, she was moving. She rose gracefully, crossing the short space between us. My gaze followed her, wide-eyed, captivated. She stood before me, her shadow falling over me, and then, slowly, deliberately, she knelt. My breath caught in my throat. Her dark eyes, filled with a raw, undeniable intensity, locked with mine. She reached out, her fingers gently tracing the line of my jaw, sending shivers through my entire body. "Your heart," she whispered, her voice husky, "it's telling you things you've kept quiet for far too long, isn't it?" And then, she leaned in, her lips meeting mine. It wasn't a tentative touch. It was a firm, clear statement. A jolt, like lightning, shot through me. My mind screamed, but my body betrayed me. Leaning into her, my lips responding. It was a kiss that tasted of Cabernet and forbidden possibility, a moment that marked the true beginning of our reckless plunge. The kiss was a tidal wave, sweeping away all my carefully constructed boundaries. My initial shock quickly dissolved into a potent, undeniable longing. Her lips were soft yet firm, a perfect fit against mine, and the scent of her, that intoxicating blend of wood and florals, filled my senses, drowning out all rational thought. My hands, which had been frozen in my lap, instinctively rose, resting on her shoulders as the kiss deepened, becoming more insistent. Her hand, which had cradled my jaw, moved to the nape of my neck, holding me close. A soft sound escaped my throat, a sound I barely recognized as my own, a sound of surrender. The world outside Kimberly's apartment ceased to exist. There was only the warmth of her mouth, the press of her body against mine, and the dizzying sensation of falling into an abyss I had only just glimpsed. She broke the kiss, pulling back just slightly, her forehead resting against mine. Her eyes, half-lidded and heavy with intensity, stared into mine, reflecting the raw feeling I knew was mirrored in my own. "You feel it too," she whispered, her voice rough with emotion, a triumphant note beneath the velvet. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, an undeniable truth that resonated deep within my bones. I couldn't speak. My breath was shallow, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. All I could do was nod, a small, almost imperceptible movement, but one that held the weight of my entire being. A slow smile, impossibly seductive, curved her lips. She rose then, pulling me gently to my feet. The silk of her robe brushed against my dress, a whisper of contact that sent a fresh wave of feeling through me. She took my hand, her fingers intertwining with mine, and led me deeper into her apartment, towards a hallway bathed in soft, inviting light. Each step was a deliberate act of choosing, a silent agreement to cross a threshold I knew I could never uncross. Guilt, sharp and cold, pricked at the edges of my consciousness, a faint echo of Mark's face, of our life. But it was quickly overshadowed, engulfed by the overwhelming current of feeling that now coursed through me, a raw, untamed force I had never known I possessed. We reached the entrance of her bedroom, a sanctuary of muted colors and soft lighting. She turned to face me, her hands moving to my waist, drawing me closer until our bodies were flush against each other. I could feel the heat radiating from her, the softness of her silk robe, the firm line of her hips. Her gaze was unyielding, passionate, and utterly consuming. "Diane," she breathed, her voice a low murmur against my ear, and then her lips were on mine again, more urgent than before. This kiss was a spark, igniting every nerve ending, every dormant feeling within me. My hands moved from her shoulders, tracing the elegant curve of her neck, then resting in the softness of her hair, pulling her closer still. The world tilted, spun, and then dissolved into a blur of sensation. There were soft sighs, whispered words, the gentle rustle of fabric. My dress slipped from my shoulders, pooling at my feet, and then her hands were on my back, a trail of warmth in their wake. Her touch was knowing, deliberate, awakening senses I had long kept dormant, showing me a landscape of feeling I had never dared to imagine. In the soft glow of her bedroom, amidst the intoxicating scent of her skin and the press of our bodies, I was no longer Diane, the content wife. I was simply a woman, raw and vulnerable, being led by an irresistible force into a new, exhilarating, and terrifying realm of feeling. Every touch, every kiss, every whispered breath was a revelation, a shattering of the old self, making way for something profoundly new and undeniably powerful. The silence of the apartment was now filled with a symphony of emotion, a testament to the undeniable connection that had just irrevocably changed everything. The morning after felt like waking in a different dimension. Sunlight, filtered through Kimberly's sheer curtains, cast a soft, ethereal glow on the room. I lay tangled in her sheets, the scent of her still heavy on them, on my skin. A profound stillness enveloped me, a quiet that was utterly unlike the emptiness of my own apartment. This quiet was imbued with memory, with the lingering ghost of shared emotion. Kimberly was awake, propped up on one elbow, watching me. Her dark eyes, usually so intense, held a softness I hadn't seen before, a gentle warmth that eased the prickle of shame that had begun to creep in. She reached out, her fingers lightly tracing the curve of my jaw, a touch that was both tender and possessive. "Good morning," she murmured, her voice still husky from sleep. "Morning," I replied, my voice raspy. A wave of complex emotions washed over me. Guilt, yes, a sharp, bitter tang in my mouth, but also a startling sense of peace, a feeling of having finally exhaled after holding my breath for an entire lifetime. She sensed my internal struggle. "No regrets, Diane," she said, her thumb stroking my cheek. "Just honesty. With yourself." Her words, so simple, yet so profound, cut through the noise of my conscience. Honesty. I had been honest with myself in that breathless, overwhelming surge of feeling. But what did that honesty demand now? I sat up, pulling the sheet instinctively to cover myself, though her gaze held no judgment, only a deep, abiding understanding. This changes everything," I whispered, the enormity of my actions finally hitting me. Mark, our life, the carefully constructed facade of my contentment, it all felt fragile, on the verge of crumbling. Kimberly shifted closer, her arms snaking around my waist, pulling me gently against her side. Her warmth was a comfort, a quiet anchor in the storm of my thoughts. "Perhaps it only reveals what was always there," she offered, her voice soft, contemplative. "Layers you hadn't peeled back yet. Feelings you hadn't acknowledged." She rested her chin on my shoulder, her breath warm against my ear. "You felt it, Diane. The way we fit. The way we hum." And I had felt it, a connection so profound, so visceral, it transcended anything I had ever known. It wasn't just physical, it was an emotional resonance that vibrated through every cell of my being. Kimberly had seen me, truly seen me, in a way no one else ever had. She had touched parts of my soul I hadn't even known existed, unlocking chambers I hadn't dared to explore. I don't know what to do," I confessed, the words a raw whisper. The vulnerability was terrifying, yet with Kimberly, it felt strangely safe. She kissed my temple, a soft, lingering press of her lips. "You don't have to know, not yet. Just feel. And allow yourself to feel." She pulled back slightly, her gaze serious now. "Mark's return is still weeks away. We have time. Time to understand this. Understand us." The us hung in the air, a bold, terrifying declaration. It was an acknowledgement of a shared future, however uncertain, however forbidden. And despite the lingering tendrils of guilt, a sense of exhilaration began to unfurl in my chest. This wasn't just a fleeting connection. It was an awakening, a healing. Kimberly wasn't just a catalyst. She was a mirror reflecting a version of myself I was only just beginning to recognize, a version that was bolder, more passionate, and profoundly, irrevocably drawn to her. In the days that followed, while Mark was away, our secret world deepened. We spent hours talking, peeling back the layers of our lives, sharing vulnerabilities and dreams. Her intelligence, her quiet strength, her profound capacity for understanding drew me in completely. And with each shared moment, each whispered confession, each stolen kiss, I felt myself changing, evolving. The quiet strength she had once observed in me was blossoming, transforming into a fierce, unapologetic self-awareness. The thought of Mark's return now felt like a heavy weight, a looming confrontation with a past I was rapidly outgrowing. Kimberly had opened a door, and through it I saw a future I hadn't dared to dream of, a future that, terrifyingly, included her. My heart, once so carefully guarded, was now irrevocably entangled, thrumming with a love that felt both forbidden and utterly essential. The weeks Mark was away unfolded like a vivid, dreamlike sequence. Each day with Kimberly was a revelation, a deeper dive into a world of emotions and sensations I had suppressed for so long. We explored the city, shared meals, lingered over coffee, and always returned to the intimate sanctuary of her apartment, where our connection burned with an intensity that left me breathless and utterly consumed. She taught me to truly feel, to embrace the raw, untamed parts of myself I'd meticulously hidden beneath layers of polite society and marital comfort. Kimberly was a master of subtle connection, not just physically, but emotionally. She didn't just ask about my past. She delved into my hopes, my quiet anxieties, the unspoken dreams I'd tucked away. She connected with me on a level that bypassed superficiality entirely. Our conversations stretched into the early hours, illuminated by the soft glow of her bedside lamp, her fingers often tracing patterns on my arm as she listened, truly listened, to every word. She shared fragments of her own life, glimpses into a past that hinted at its own complexities and sorrows, creating a bond of mutual vulnerability. "You're like a wild garden, Diane," she murmured one night, her lips brushing my ear, beautifully cultivated on the surface, but with a vibrant, untamed heart just waiting to bloom. Her words were a mirror, showing me a strength and passion I hadn't realized I possessed until her gaze reflected it back. She was not just drawing me in. She was healing me, drawing out a deeper, more authentic version of myself. Yet, as the days dwindled, the distant echo of Mark's return began to grow louder, more insistent. It was like a slowly tightening band around my chest, constricting the exhilarating freedom I'd found with Kimberly. Each time his name came up, a flicker of something, guilt, fear, sorrow, would cross my face, and Kimberly, ever perceptive, would notice. She never pushed, never demanded, simply held my gaze, her dark eyes filled with a quiet understanding that said, "I see your struggle, and I'm here." One evening, as the last remnants of a fiery sunset painted the sky, we were sitting on her balcony, wrapped in a single blanket, the city lights twinkling below like scattered jewels. Mark was due back in 2 days. The weight of it was suffocating. "He's a good man, Mark," I said, the words barely a whisper against the cool evening air. My voice felt brittle. Kimberly's arm tightened around me, pulling me closer. "He is," she agreed, her voice gentle, devoid of any jealousy or judgment. "And you love him, in your own way." "I do," I affirmed, the confession feeling hollow in my own ears, tainted by the fervent emotion that now burned for Kimberly. The love I felt for Mark was comfortable, stable, a warm blanket. But the love I felt for Kimberly was a wildfire, consuming everything in its path, reshaping my very core. She turned my face to hers, her fingers cupping my chin. Her dark eyes, usually so fierce, were soft, vulnerable. "But what do you need, Diane?" she asked, her voice a low, profound rumble. "What does your heart truly crave?" Her question hung in the air, heavy with consequence. It was the question I had been avoiding, the truth I had been running from. Looking into her eyes, I saw not just intensity, but a depth of unwavering support, an implicit promise that whatever my answer, she would be there. A shiver ran through me. The comfortable life, the expectations, the societal norms, they all seemed to recede, distant echoes against the overwhelming reality of my feelings. I thought of Mark's steady, predictable affection, and then of Kimberly's challenging, transformative love. One offered security, the other, an exhilarating, terrifying freedom of self. My gaze dropped from hers, fixing on the distant city lights. The choice, I realized, was no longer about right or wrong, about loyalty or betrayal. It was about authenticity, about finally claiming the woman I was becoming. The quiet strength Kimberly had ignited in me was now demanding expression, demanding a path that honored my deepest truths. I took a deep, shuddering breath, the scent of Kimberly, the feel of her arms around me, grounding me. The decision, though unspoken, was forming, solidifying within me. It was terrifying, yes, fraught with the pain of dismantling a life, but also infused with a profound, almost sacred sense of liberation. I knew, with a certainty that resonated through my very bones, that I could not, would not, go back to the woman I was before Kimberly. The journey to truly knowing myself had begun, and it was a path I would walk, come what may.